said 3 inches in 48 hours or 10 inches cumulative. I think it's fair to say we agreed that those may not be the best numbers. We haven't quite ironed out what the final numbers should be. So I thought we could do that now.
And that's fine. But the intention of this is simply that when enough rain has fallen that there may be overland water flow, that all the erosion control structures, the culverts, inside ditches, and other things need to be checked and maintained to be sure that they are properly functioning and effective. We don't have Anthony wanted a trigger. We couldn't find any real precedent for it, so I made a suggestion. He thinks it's been excessive or too much rain, and I'm fine. I just want to find something that functionally works for the project.
Okay, so what I suggested, and there are, of course, John has a winter ops plan in which there are various triggers in there that are mandated by the rules. If there's sediment running down the road, if there's 30% chance of rain or whatever. So there are several triggers in the plan already that requires the LTO to take action in case of rain. This was a very specific one. He's being proactive in that he wants the LTO to go out there and check water bars before the rain gets so heavy that there's a potential for something bad to happen, as opposed to waiting until it's been raining for a couple of days. I guess I should go check things out. So John came up with 3 inches in 48 hours or 10 inches cumulatively. Well, in terms of the time, I think John and I agreed that a ½ an inch in 24 hours. Here's my suggestion. In terms of significant rain event, and actually when I think about it, this sort of is going to apply across the board to operations. And ½ an inch of rain in 24 hours will require the operation to shut down, until it stops raining. And then after that, the RPF will need to go out there and assess the situation and make a determination if it's dried out sufficiently to restart operations. So depending if it's literally just a ½ an inch in 24 hours, depending on when that ½ inch falls, you may be able to get out there the next day. If in reality it is 3 inches over 48 hours, it may take a little longer. So does the ½ inch work, John?
Yeah, I mean, ½ inch in 24 hours.
Yeah, and you shut down, and then it's going to be up to you or your representative to go, hey, Mr. LTO, you can start work again. I'm not going to tell you that. Well, I'm not going to require any sort of amendment or, hey, I went out and looked at it. It's just like there's so many things in the THP, you don't have to run everything by CAL FIRE. So.
But I think that's kind of common sense. If you get a ½ inch of rain, you're going to shut down anyway.
I agree, and it is common sense, but I would still. It's defining significant rain event.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, so ½ an inch, 24 hours, shut down.
Yeah.
Shut down.
Until
RPF says okay.
Until inspected.
I'm just going to say until RPF says, and this is not going to be the exact wording.
No,
but until RPF says okay. So
now, just for at least for Diane and Aaron to understand what's happening is, at the conclusion, we didn't really talk about it, but there are 3 possible outcomes from this meeting.
Yes.
The review team chairman can say that the plan is acceptable as it is without any changes, and I recommend it be signed. He can say the plan would be acceptable if these recommended changes were made.
Yes.
Or he could say this plan is fatally flawed and it should be denied. And so in the second case, which is where we're at right now, he will come out with a letter saying we don't need to get all of this stuff worked out and advocated. He'll come out with a letter saying that I recommend that these changes be made to the plan.
And that's a good point. Thank you, John. Just for those of you who don't know or aren't familiar with the process, I kind of do a shorthand for myself, and then I will finalize the language. For example, the recommendation is not specifically going to say RPF says okay. However, I will send this recommendation to John, and he will once again have a chance to respond to it. And it is not, I'm hoping that I will craft the mitigation such that John and Mr. Harkin will have no issues with it, and they'll just go, we agree. But I have had instances where the RPF will respond going, this isn't exactly what we agreed to. I modified it a little bit, and then we get to go. And there is some give and take back and forth on this, but the language, the real point is, I'm going to craft some more formal language, some enforceable language, and that's going to be that's a key term for me. That both the LTO can know exactly what he or she needs to do, John knows what he or she needs to do. Everybody associated with this thing, especially during operations, knows what their responsibilities are, when those responsibilities need to be acted on.
Okay, just to the other thing we didn't talk about, but I selected the St. Helena station because there are only 2 stations in the area that have online, real-time monitoring. And that's
What's
one of
the
two.
second one? I mean, that sounds good to me. That's why I didn't bring it up.
The other one is up in Angwin.
I believe the St. Helena is probably the more appropriate one.
Well, and one thing we looked at is the Angwin is on the opposite facing slope. So the St. Helena station is in the same topography, so it should be the best.
Well, plus it also microenvironments aside, I believe linearly, Calistoga and St. Helena are closer to each other than Calistoga and Angwin. So it just
that was my makes sense.
The other one is the 10 inches. I've been mulling that over. I guess my question is that 10 inches a shutdown period? Like, let's say we have a really bad winter and we get, because if we have the half inch, if we have the half inch within 24 hours, that takes care of that. The question is, should there be a cumulative rainfall amount that once we hit this amount, we're shutting down, period? And John, as you and I talked, if that happens to be after January 31st, well then, that's the way your plan was written anyways. If it works, if it comes into December 15th, well then you're potentially losing, admittedly, some operation time.
I hadn't intended, and the reason operations shut down after January 31st is when the northern spotted owl.
Oh, okay, that's I didn't consider that, or I didn't put that together.
Or permit expires and operation can't start again until you have a new determination for that year.
Well, you know what? Now that I think about it, in the past we have traditionally sort of put this upper limit where we shut down operations entirely. Kind of takes the decision away from some people in terms of should I be out there operated or not. But because we have that half inch and 24-hour caveat where, John, you will be ultimately responsible for saying whether it should operate or not. If we get 10 inches of rain and you say, hey guys, it's okay, I think it's dry enough, and we get sediment going down and moving off-site and going to places which shouldn't go, then it's on you. So if you're okay with that, we don't have to put a cumulative cutoff on it, because you're the one who's going to give the blessing on whether operations should occur after a rain event.
I'm fine with that because I believe the winter operating plan has enough controls.
I don't necessarily disagree. I know in the past and that we put these sort of upper limits on it, and again, part of that is because we don't necessarily have an RPF going out there and going, man, it rained too much, we should shut it down. It's just the LTO, it's very simple. It's like, oh, we got X inches of rain, we're done for the season, and the RPF is not involved. Because the RPF is very specifically involved, I'm okay without having that cutoff.
And what invariably happens is he has one load left and it has to wait until next year to get out.
Again, it's on you. So, and okay, so that takes care of that. Although I do want to.
Anthony, hello.
Yes, hi, Kevin.
The Regional Water Board would prefer there be no winter ops period, but we understand that it can be done if it's dry. But we believe that these plans are planned correctly or scheduled correctly. There'd be no reason to be operating in the winter time. But that's kind of the rules allow these kind of things to occur. But
yeah, my response, Kevin, to that would be right now the winter ops plan it complies with the rules. the way the plan is written, and now including this little caveat where John's really responsible, once a rain event occurs, which is a little, I understand it's different than you come October 15th, there's like no, if we just say no winter ops, then there's, nobody's involved, right? There's no winter ops. But having said that, in my opinion, the winter ops plan certainly conforms to the rules on paper. Based on my review and experience, I believe it will. I don't see any potential for an adverse impact if the winter operations plan is adhered to and conscientiously followed by the LTO. Having said that, so I'm not willing at this point in time to just say a blanket no winter ops. Having said that, I've said my piece. If you and John, if there's something between what exists currently and the blanket no winter ops, it's the second review. It's your opportunity to talk to John and whoever.
If there's sediment discharges during the winter, there's going to be violations.
Oh yeah, that's definitely. It's a violation of the basin plan. It's a violation of the forest practice rules. So yeah, no, there's a lot of burden being placed on the RPF and the LTO in terms of making sure that this thing, it doesn't go south.
And I understand that, Kevin, and I agree. The purpose is not to push operations when it's wet, is to allow operations during dry periods. And we often get them in the winter when there are long extended dry periods when you can safely operate without any risk of sediment discharge.
Right, I agree.
And also, and this is for the people who are maybe just don't know this stuff off the top of their head, not that I do, but once that winter ops plan occurs, for weekends or extended shutdown periods, the plan needs to be buttoned up like it was being buttoned up for the season. So, water bars are in, rolling dips are in, whatever erosion control structure that would need to be in if they were shutting down, period, needs to be put in just if you're shutting down for the weekend or it's Thanksgiving and your crew's taking, Thursday to Saturday off or Thursday to Sunday off. So, and again, that's more for edification, just kind of a reminder to people. That's kind of a standard rule, whether it's stated in the plan or that's one of those rules that needs to be adhered to, whether it's stated in the plan or not. But so, do you? And I'm sorry, Kevin. Do you want to discuss this a little more? Like I said, certainly you're free to talk to John if you guys can. If there's somewhere in between you think you guys might be able to land.
Oh, no, it's okay. I just want to go on record that if the plan goes through and gets approved, it will be definitely out.
Okay.
Watching and observing and looking and.
Okay. No, fair enough.
Could I ask you a question or wait till later?
I prefer that you wait.
Okay.
I really
that's
do.
Fine.
If you can,
Yeah,
thank you. Okay, so that takes care of first review. Anyways, first review was acceptable, John's responses to first review are acceptable. So again, the PHI occurred, all reports are in, all responses are in. So we're going to jump into that, which I think is going to be where most of the discussion is going to occur this morning. As far as CAL FIRE goes, I certainly read the CAL FIRE report. I looked at John's responses. They were pretty much all acceptable. There were two recommendations made by CAL FIRE that John, I think he agreed to, but it wasn't quite worded the way I wanted it worded. One of them had to do with the fire safe. Kim Sohn, our inspector, recommended that the plan specifically say, well, she said fire safe permit. I'm saying that there's no other harvesting permits are to be submitted on the property until the THP is completed and signed off as approved. John agreed to that, but it turns out he inserted the wrong page when he responded. So he agreed to that, so that's taken care of. The other one had to do with the biological assessment for the THP. Initially, John, he did do some write-up, but not all potential species that were located within the biological assessment area. Not the THP. The THP is definitely accounted for. But listed species, and by listed I mean state, federal, Fish and Game, California Fish and Wildlife listed, Board of Forestry sensitive species, etc. Not every single one of those was accounted for in the THP, although it is acknowledged they are accounted and then some in the EIR. However, because the THP is its own standalone document in terms of CEQA, referring to the EIR is fair up to a point. But there's just some things that the THP needs to specifically say. You can't go look at this document. So that was a recommendation out of the PHI. In my review, I agreed with Kim. John didn't disagree. He just said, no, this is covered. You just need to look at the EIR. Long story short, what John did, and we're accepted, and we're okay, or more than okay with it, is he just took the biological assessment out of the EIR and incorporated it into the THP. So that covers it and then some, in my opinion. So otherwise, all of the recommendations from CAL FIRE were agreed to and approved. So I really don't have any other question or discussion for John regarding that. Robin, did you ever call in? Robin Swan is from Kevin. Robin.
I know, Robin.
Yeah, she said she was going to call in. Maybe she decided she didn't, or she didn't need to. So I'm going to take a chance and speak for her in that I did ask Robin prior to today if there were any issues as far as CDFW, I'm still used to DFG. If CDFW had any issues or concerns with John's responses to their PHI reports, she indicated they were satisfied, no changes, no additional information. So they're good. Dave Longstreth and Kevin, if I start, or for anybody, if I start speaking a little too fast or getting loud or whatever, please don't be shy and just tell me to take it down. Dave, so I'll let you speak.
Responses to first review questions?
Responses to first review. Yeah, I guess what I want to know is any responses to first review adequate, and responses to were responses to
Our recommendations.
PHI recommendation,
Yeah.
were they adequate?
I believe they were.
That makes it easy. Okay, so Kevin, that leaves you and you and I have been having email discussion, and I know you've been talking to John either, I don't know if directly or through email, but I know you've been in contact with John. There's a lot of disagreement between water quality and the RPF, so I'll let you take it from here. And I guess what I'm hoping, or let me put it this way, what I'm suggesting is that if you don't mind going through your recommendations one by one, and you don't need to necessarily read them, I think we're all familiar with them, and then John, do you see any potential for,
Let me tell you.
or you know what, don't let me tell you how to do your job, just go for it.
Let me go for what I think are the two main issues here. One, I don't believe the engineering geologic mapping or landslide mapping done to date is adequate. So, although I have great respect for Dave, I disagree that the mapping to date is adequate for landslides. One. Two, I don't think the water course classifications or mapping, extended and so on, I believe is really inadequate also. So those are going to be the two main issues I'd like to focus on.
Okay, well then, especially since Dave's here, I guess in terms of the adequacy of the review by various CEGs or PGs that have occurred to date, please don't take this the wrong way or anybody get offended, but this is one of those situations where I refer to as dueling professionals, which is not unusual, where you have two professionals and they don't agree, and yet they're both professionals. So my question to you, Kevin, is given the fact that, and then I'll let Dave speak, but how do you see resolving this issue?
Well, first off, I don't think Dave and I should be battling about this. I think
I didn't mean to be offended. It was just a joke.
The proponent should provide an adequate report in accordance with CGS Note 45. I think that was one of our recommendations. a lot of the geotechnical engineering geology work conducted to date has not been for the timber harvest plan. It's been for different proposed developments there, including the current one. And again, I mean, we could pick out one, the lot tree landslide, for example. The previous THP kind of poo-pooed it and said it wasn't there, and it's clearly there. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But RGH never talks about that slide at all and whether it impacts the property. And, you know, that's a big red flag for me. And one area of landslide that they do map, they've got it mapped, its limits are too small. It's much larger than that. Another area that's been transferred into the THP maps, they show as a slide area upslope of the 2 Class 3 water courses that converge. That is yet to be corrected on any map. So it's, you know, my review of the LiDAR maps and the which I've looked at extensively, it looks like pretty much most of the slopes out there have been impacted by historic landslide at some point. Now, Dave could disagree with that.
Well,
That's fine. But there hasn't been any independent review of the RGH work. The city EIR approval did not include any kind of geotechnical peer review. And I'm not putting my stamp or license on anything unless I see an adequate report submitted to it. I mean, it's simple as that.
well, hi Kevin, it's Dave. I agree that it shouldn't be you or I who's doing the mapping out there. That's not our job. And so I think you're not unreasonable in asking for the project proponents, consultants to address these issues that you've brought up. Some of the landslides that you've mapped are very subtle, and I'm not sure they're landslide deposits. You would need to do subsurface investigation in order to prove that.
I agree. I'm going
They're
off.
it looks like to me the mapping that you did on the map that you called a preliminary landslide map, any steep slopes you mapped as a landslide.
Oh, really?
And, you know, a lot of these are drainages. They're just drainages. They're not landslides.
I don't think that's true, Dave, but you can give that opinion if you want.
Well, I think it should be the consultants who address that. And in reviewing a timber harvest plan, CGS is not going so far as to be reviewing or assessing slope stability analysis, and that's the sort of realm I think that you're wading into. A lot of these issues for development would require third-party review, and there would be a grading plan submitted, and normally following common practices in California, there would be slope stability analysis that are conducted along with those plans. Now, this development is not at that stage yet, as far as I understand. Is that correct?
Correct. The fully designed plans will go before the city of Calistoga and have a separate peer review as part of that. Either the registered engineer of city of Calistoga, and or they may bring in separate peer review as necessary.
When do you anticipate that occurring? Or do you have that on is that on the horizon at any time?
Actually, a substantial portion of it actually has already been reviewed. As we, historically speaking, and as part of the original plan set that we received a final map for, we submitted the RGH geotechnical plans along with the structural engineering plans that went through a full review, which is part of the original harvest plan that we received and acted upon. That effort was indeed reviewed, and we essentially just parlayed that configuration of the roadway and work product into the modification of the resort endeavor. So the top ridge line of the project has changed, but not the alignment of the roadway per se going up the hillside.
I'd like to interject. I've had some recent correspondence with Eric Lundquist at the city. I asked him to confirm whether there had been a geotechnical peer review done, and he confirmed there had not been. It was done by they did a EIR review by Michael Brandman Associates. Michael Brandman Associates doesn't have any geotechnical engineering geologists on staff.
Kevin, you're partially correct. Eric is, as noted, as part of the EIR review and review of this of the resort project approvals. Indeed, during the EIR process, no, there wasn't a separate peer review because the plans are only at conceptual level, and when coming forth, they will indeed have to go through a peer review. So, correct, as part of the resort project, but what I was referring to are the historical documents as it relates to the original 35 lot plan and the design of the road, and those plans that were reviewed and certified were indeed reviewed.
Kevin, I have a question. To me, there's two issues going on here. One is a disclosure issue in terms of, has the area been adequately assessed? You know, our slides, you know, the rules require that slides be mapped, and so there's a disclosure issue. Have all the slides been mapped? And the second issue is the THP as mitigated now? All the mitigations requirements in the THP right now, are they adequate to not exacerbate any known or unknown slides? And I know that's not necessarily a fair question for an unknown slide. The rules do require, if during part of operations, for example, if a slide becomes present, or not present I should say, if a slide is discovered during operations that was not disclosed previously, you know, then basically operations stop until they figure out what to do with the slide. So my question to you is, again, it seems, well, it's twofold. One is, part of it seems like a disclosure issue, but do you have a concern that even with what has been disclosed so far, mitigations are not adequate to address the known slides, for example?
Well, yes, of course I have that. And I brought up an example where RGH never, in any of their work, has talked about the large landslide map by Park Galatria CGS. This is one example. Dave drew a headscarp area on into the plan a little bit. I think the slide is much larger. I think the morphology of that area, to me, it's a much larger slide area that encroaches much more into the plan area. And again, if you're saying RGH has done these reports, but they've never talked about it, I can't sit and say, oh, this is adequate. I mean, I just can't do it.
Well,
That's just one area of the property.
okay, well, that's kind of what I was referring to earlier, and I won't use the term I used before, but where you have two professionals who look at the same piece of ground and they interpret it differently. I'm going to say they're not both necessarily correct and they're not both necessarily incorrect. But my point is they're both professionals. And I'm working under the assumption that they are reasonable professionals at...
Terry, I want to bring it up. The previous landslide was talked about in the previous THP, and CGS said it wasn't there. Okay? It was due to differential erosion or weather.
I don't think that's correct.
And now it's clear that there's a landslide there. And whether the limits have been properly mapped or bounded, I don't believe they have. Again, RGH has never recognized that slide and never talked about it at all. But there are other areas of the property that are very anomalous, at least topographically speaking, that I believe need to be addressed.
Okay, well,
we know about large landslide debris flow that's active. I think the slide area is much larger than what RGH is showing on their map, and what the THP maps show. And that's all I can really say.
Well, Kevin, what debris flow was active? We didn't observe activity when we were on the...
When I come back active, 1990, Herzog was talking about it being recently active in their report. So, you know, yes, 20 4 years, 25 years later.
Well, now it would be
Nobody's
called,
ever even discussed why the debris flow occurred.
that would be suspended. Now it's suspended. It's not active.
Well, it's going to be, I mean, they have a road crossing it,
I agree that the causes of the landslide or that debris flow should be queried and addressed, which to me it seems pretty straightforward. It looks like the road is directing water to that location. But I don't think it's fair to say it's active.
well,
That's an old debris
Really
flow
active.
that's suspended at
Well-
this point in time.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here, and again, I'm going to reiterate my point. We have two professionals who don't agree, and they both looked at the same spot, and that happens. So I'm going to go back to my original question, Kevin, in terms of, you're talking about an independent third-party review. So I'm asking, what would you find satisfactory? Because I'm thinking, okay, so now Enchanted Resorts, is that? Enchanted Resorts LLC now hires, whether it's RGH or, another firm to go out there and sort of review what's done so far. Maybe they go out there to look at it. This is right now supposition. Or as they just go out there and go, okay guys, tell me what's out there. Would that be adequate? Who's the third party review then? Because at that point, I imagine you'd look at it again, and then you're going to have. I would certainly ask Dave to look at that if we went that route, and then I'm sure it's going to get incorporated into the EIR. I mean, if you're going to spend money, you may as well get the most you can out of it. But what I'm really asking you is, so you feel these slides are, there's not full disclosure in terms of the number of slides that are out there. I'm hearing Dave going, he doesn't agree, but he doesn't disagree.
Well, yeah,
I don't know, but so how do we
Because
resolve this issue is what I'm really trying to figure out.
I think what you said earlier about disclosure and then whether or not the conditions are mitigated are important points. And one, I think the disclosure should be done by the consultants. It shouldn't be done by us, the regulators. So,
Yes,
and Kevin's brought up a good point. There's topography out there that is suggestive of large deep-seated landslides. Those are not the types of landslides we expect an RPF to map.
Is it the
They're
type?
large regional features. When we were on the ground, topography was smooth. It wasn't hummocky.
Okay.
So and then when I looked at air photos and I looked at Google Earth images, to me they're very, very subtle features. And so I would say they're questionable whether or not they exist. But if they do, the consultants should address that. Your consultants should go out and say, yes, I agree, or say, there's bowl-shaped topography here, and there may be a landslide here.
Well, hey, Dave, do you believe the Delaware landslide is questionable?
No, not Mark's. I'm not talking about that one.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I think, this is John. I think we need to distinguish between the project development and the tree removal, because now, and our, as Dave said, from our standpoint, and it's been made very clear to us, as foresters, we don't practice geology without a license, but we are trained to recognize active features and things that could reasonably be expected to be affected by timber harvesting. Are these very deep-seated subtle landslides that we're talking about the kind that would be affected by timber harvesting?
Well, that's the next point. The first thing is the disclosure issue that Anthony brought up, and then the second thing would be whether or not the proposed operations are going to have an adverse impact to slope stability of those deep-seated landslides. And that's what I think Kevin is asking the consultants to comment on.
Well, we have 2 letters from them now.
But the problem with those letters,
Do those still not address the issue?
they don't, in that the consultants are not specifically addressing topography that may be suggestive. What they need to do is have this preliminary map that Kevin came up with and say, yes, I agree with that, or no, I don't agree with it. And then the second, that's disclosure. And then the second point would be whether or not the proposed operations are having an adverse impact, which they sort of do comment on one of the areas, but they're not commenting on all of these areas. It's my opinion that the proposed operations are not going to have an adverse impact on these deep-seated features.
But Kevin, water quality does have that concern.
Well,
No, that's just, I'm
I
not
mean,
trying.
we're looking at a substantial removal of the forest here, permanent. Not a clear cut, which will grow back. We're talking about permanent removal of half the property at least. And then selection harvesting, as aggressive as CAL FIRE will allow them to do out there for the remaining part of the forest. And we're not satisfied with that.
Would you repeat that last statement? Because that didn't make sense to me.
What you're going to go in and do selection harvesting in the forest reserve areas, right? You're going to remove as many trees. You're going to do a fire suppression plan. You're going to remove as much understory and overstory canopy as will be allowed.
And that's not correct, and that's not what the management plan says.
Well, you know.
Well, you know, Kevin, regardless, I think aggressive, I find that, I don't think that's the best word. I mean, they're doing selection, which means they're going to have 75 square feet of basal area, they're going to have 818s. You are correct. It was pointed out to me by somebody from within CAL FIRE, you know, it's not a true selection in that because of the fire safe aspects of it, you know, you might be focusing on the understory, you know, the ladder fuels kind of thing, which, you know, makes sense. But the bottom line is you're still going to have that 75 square feet of out there. You're still going to have your 818s. I guess the thing about aggressive, I mean, if you're going to turn that aggressive, then I think you need to talk to the Board of Forestry, because that's
I'm just saying
their
they're going
rules.
to maximize what they can do out there. It's not going to be a light touch operation. And
Well, that's
and a lot of the light touch operations, this is not a light touch
Well,
operation.
I'm sorry. I guess I disagree with that, and I think we need to fundamentally understand that the purpose of this removal is not economic timber harvesting, and both the EIR, the city of Calistoga's restrictions on it in terms of tree removal and everything else is aimed at maintaining an attractive, healthy forest. We're in the forest reserve, and I just think that the whole concept that this is an aggressive harvest is just not correct.
Okay. I'm going to jump in and say, well, two things. I'm going to suggest we take a little break here in a moment. But I think we're getting a little off track, however you want to characterize it. The real question is, regardless of the amount of cutting that's going out there, will that amount of cutting potentially result in sort of adverse impact and exacerbate the slides that are out there? So I want to get away from the characterization. I'm afraid we're going to start chasing rabbits with that.
Yeah, and
So-
a lot of times, Anthony, these are done on a qualitative type of basis. But the reality of it here is that there actually is geotechnical data for the property where they could actually do some analysis here.
Okay. Well, Diane, you had a question.
Again, I'm not gonna say I feel good about that because, a lot of timber harvest plans that have engineering and geologic studies associated with them did not do soil boring, did not do test pits, did not take any samples, blah, blah, blah. Here, they have that data. And they could do it. They could do a decent quantitative slope stability type of analysis or something. But, again, they need to first recognize where the slide areas are, where they may be, where they may not be, and so on. And that hasn't been done. So.
okay, I do want to make a point because we talked about i.e. the conversion and the clearing. I wanted people to really understand that except for the top on the relatively flatter ground and except for the entrance road to the project, most of the road rights-of-ways and road grading limits have already been cleared and are not going to be impacted by this plan. The rights-of-ways were cleared under the 2005 plan, and the roads are in place, and we are not constructing roads. We're not going to be. We have put in, you know, in response to both yours and Dave's recommendations, you know, correcting the drainage on that main road going up the hill. And the road reconstruction at the bottom is the one area that has been very extensively studied by RGH, and they did very extensive drilling and coring, and when that road is constructed, it will be under a grading plan and with a complete geotechnical specs. So what we're really talking about is the conversion on the top of the ridge and the selection harvest.
And I just want to supplement one thing that John has said, and I know you don't want us going afield on the aggressive versus non-aggressive issue, but for those who might not be familiar with the project, a key mitigation incorporated into the project design was the protection of the view shed. That was extremely important to the city, and they wanted to be able to look up and see the forest, and that is yet another reason that maybe John doesn't view this as an aggressive approach.
Who was that speak?
It's Diane Kinderman.
She's with Enchanted. She's with the plan submitter. You know, if you guys don't mind, I'd like to take 5. Kevin, is that okay?
Well,
Or you know, I'm looking at the clock. It's 6 minutes to 11. Let's come back at 11 o'clock. I'm not gonna sign off. I am gonna put the phone on mute. And just so you know, mostly I'm gonna ask Dave, because you referred to CGS 45. I don't have that memorized. I'm gonna ask Dave if he can get me a copy of that so I can look at it and see. Because you refer that in your PHI report that you basically want a geotechnical report done in accordance with or something.
Well, let me note right now that
Okay.
those are guidelines.
Yes, okay.
So they don't have to be in compliance with them.
Oh, no, I don't mean, no, but here's what I'm driving at, and this is part of the reason I want the break, is I want to look at that, and then we can talk about this more, but one of your recommendations is that it be done, you know, the guidelines provided, you know, be in accordance with the guidelines provided in CGS note number 45. I realize that they are not required in RPF is not required to follow those guidelines, but I thought, let's take 5, and that might be a good place to kind of pick up and see if we can resolve this issue or not, but
I was going to say that CGS Note 45 was done for a really, really strong reason, and that was because of the lack of engineering geologic studies and input that was being done for a lot of plans.
well, yes, I appreciate that, Kevin, and mostly I just want to refresh my memory with it.
Sure.
So let's come back. Let's literally take 5. Like I said, I'm not going to hang up, but I am going to put the phone on mute. We'll be back at 11.